Namaskar, Jai Hind, and hello to everyone. And with me is Professor Sonali Chitarkar from Miranda House, Delhi University. This is the episode 5, the last episode of our topic Politico Military Decisions in Geopolitics in India since 1947. You would have already seen the first 4 episodes. This episode is going to be much closer home, something to do with us, a term which I am introducing here in discussions, which is otherwise not part of the academic field. And since Sonali is a specialist of that field, so I just introduce this term to see what her reactions are. When we talk about geopolitics, we have been talking about actually India and anything beyond borders.
True.
Today, we are going to talk of everything that is happening inside India, that is in the hinterland in the country. I want to call it as reverse geopolitics. Now, whether it is insurgency, Punjab, J&K, Naxals, or whatever is happening in the east, this is being done by someone. Now, this someone is not one state, one country, one organization, or one group of people. It may be multiple number of organizations, states, groups spread all over. So, when we talk about reverse geopolitics, whatever is happening here, unless we go down to the actual roots, which may be outside our borders, which may not be outside our borders, it may be very much within our borders. It may be our own citizens, they may be inside the government. And when these sort of things, insurgencies happen at different places, we have to think about reverse geopolitics. Also, we are going to talk about the political rhetoric after surgical strikes or say para commandos. I'm just talking about something which is closer in history that has happened, and I'm not listing out everything that has happened since 47, since this is fresh in our memory. And say Myanmar, the commandos who had gone across, or Galwan action for that matter, and thereafter all this political rhetoric, and then we exploit that. So, how exactly does that fit in the geopolitics? How does that fit in making us go away or digressing from the theme of wanting to plan for the next 25 years? Does politic rhetoric somehow uh, make us not react to what is happening? That is one, or maybe not plan for something in future. This session again, like I said, the last one is going to be Professor Sonali Heavy. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Colonel Pandey. Yeah, it's a very interesting term that you have introduced, reverse geopolitics. And as far as we are talking about the impact of geopolitical events on inside our borders, uh, I would say it's good to reverse the gaze inside and look at what's happening within our borders as a result of actions, or as a result of geopolitical actions. And this is nothing new. I mean, reversing the gaze is not something new. The biggest example of this I can give you is the example of how geopolitical events influence common people on the roads is when you look at the events that preceded the 1971 issue with Bangladesh, the formation of Bangladesh. So there's a very good book which I think everybody should look at. It's called The Blood Telegram, and it's written by Gary J. Bass, who has looked at archival sources, and he has looked at reporting at that particular point of time. And from his research, it's very evident that both Nixon and Kissinger, they knew very well the extent of genocide that Pakistan was committing against what was its own population at that point of time, and also a very considerable minority population. However, America refused to intervene and stop Pakistan, uh, all because of a geopolitical compulsion. And we all are very well aware of the 1970s and how Pakistan was very central to America's geostrategic program at that point of time. So, yes, it is very important to reverse the gaze inside, again, look outside. And, in that sense, I think, yeah, it's a very interesting term, reverse geopolitics. So, if you look at it carefully, you look at events in Kashmir, you look at events in Punjab, you cannot understand the insurgency in Kashmir unless you look at a whole range of events that started from. Very often, we tend to place events insurgency in Punjab. I would not use the word insurgency. I will be very clear that it's terrorism within the 80s decade. But we need to go back to 10 years before that and look at what was happening in Iran with the revolution, the Islamic revolution there. We need to look at events in Saudi Arabia, and then we need to reverse the gaze inside and look at how the entire problem in Kashmir developed. And again, with Punjab, you can find a similar, operation, similar things operating. Similarly, you've spoken about we speak about the Naxal issue, which at this point of time I would like to say that communism or any ideology which is aligned to the left, it has always been supranational. It goes beyond national borders. Okay, so we need to understand how this complex network of ideology also works in the world. And at this point of time, you can look at, there are a number of documents in the public domain which belong to the Naxal groups, and they declare their networks are very clearly laid out there. So yes, these are international networks which are feeding into very real developmental problems that exist in our country. And you will find similar, it will be very interesting to do a comparative study of such phenomena in other countries as well. So yes, again, you need to reverse the gaze if you want to understand the Naxal problem. If you want to look at what happened in the Northeast, the entire problems, that issues that we've been having in the Northeast, we will have to look at the influence of China. We will have to look at how China does not function within a 5 to 10 year plan. It functions over its programs, strategies. They run into, you've spoken about 25 years blocks. They probably run into 50 to 100 years blocks. So that's how proactive they are. So yes, if we look at our own internal borders by reversing the gaze internally, it is in a sense the manifestation of geopolitics within our borders. So in that sense, yes, reverse geopolitics comes across as a very interesting term, and I'm sure we in some point of time we can try and theorize this. The second thing that you spoke about is political rhetoric. And in this, we've been hearing the term rhetoric a lot in the post-truth era, which is, the first, essentially defined as the era after the first Trump government was voted in USA. So, yes, like you said, it's not a new thing. Political rhetoric has always been there, to the extent that when we had a national, I don't want to say tragedy, but definitely a national misadventure in the form of the 1962 Sino-Indian War. Even the media that comes to us as a result of that war starts by glorifying Jawaharlal Nehru and the present government at that point of time. So whether you go to the Nehru era, whether you go to the Indira Gandhi era, you will see this larger than life construction of political leaders happens with consistent political rhetoric. What now has happened is that it's turned into it's two ways. So everybody is barking at each other, and the governments do utilize events, national, international events, to legitimize their rule, which is not, I can see the phenomena happening. That doesn't mean I am coming out in support of it, because I would clearly say, for me, the fundamental bottom line is national interest. So if that is serving national interest, if political rhetoric is serving national interest, I may still want to, look at it. I may still want to accept that it's a phenomena that is there and we have to live with it. But if it is harming national interest, if it is harming the formation of policy, if it is just, if it's behaving like a smoke screen, which political rhetoric almost always does, then we really need to question it. I mean, after all, whether it be Galwan or whether it be the Pulwama incident or any of these incidents that we see currently, again, I'm bringing the temporal frame to the current times. So, after all, our men are not, they're not media or advertising, modes of advertising. These are real men who have lost their lives, who've been subject to considerable war gaming out here, and so the focus, as far as the focus goes, should be on ensuring national interest, and political rhetoric would remain a questionable phenomena as far as any analysis in the backdrop of national interest is concerned. So with that, I'll just kind of hand it over to you to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sonali, for giving deep insight into what is your understanding of reverse geopolitics. There are a lot of things that come to my mind. They may come as random thoughts, but they come straight from heart and they come only in national interest and nothing else. When I say national interest, whatever I say, whatever I observe, whatever I am talking about, it may not sound very good to certain ears, but that's fine so far as India benefits at the end. When we talk about reverse geopolitics, we have absolutely no idea how it is negatively impacting the security establishment in the country. We have no idea. We are not even talking about, let me take J&K. 89-90, just open Google, just check. 89-90, the actual J&K insurgency, terrorism, whatever you want to call it, happened. So it started with army, right? Controlling it. In less than 4 years, Rashtriya Rifles were built, 45 battalions. That went on to 70 battalions. In no time, there were 4 div-size headquarters which came. It's all there, everywhere. Counter-insurgency forces, they were called. The people who were lieutenants or captains in 1990 have put in 31 years of service today.
Okay.
They are major generals and above. Do we realize that?
Yeah.
They are major generals and above. And the only thing they have seen is insurgency. So to them, being in the military means nothing else but insurgency.
True.
That's why there is nothing, no talk ever on two-front war. No one looks outside. Now our entire episodes, Sonali makes a statement, the armed forces are at the borders. And I have always corrected Sonali in our talks that don't say at the borders, say from the borders, outside. So that's a start point. As soon as you start talking about anything that happens beyond the borders, the turf war start, where the bureaucracy will start telling the military that geopolitics is not your business, you only do what we ask you to do. Perfectly okay. So military does, so they stop thinking. They don't even think about geopolitics. Now, reverse geopolitics, when you talk about, now homeland security is not military's job. So they have absolutely no idea. But then you consume the entire military into counterinsurgency. In J&K, when those years were there in 84, 85, Punjab, in East, they are all. So now actually, armed forces which are supposed to be at the borders and beyond the borders are actually working inside the borders. Neither they do know anything about the geopolitics outside, nor they have any idea about geopolitics inside. What sort of leadership are we building up? That does not talk about two-front war, does not have courage to call China an enemy, does not have the courage to reorganize the complete army and give suggestions in time while in uniform or even after retirement to write. No one writes. So, result is what? When Galwan takes place, now everyone says, who will bell the cat? And now suddenly someone comes with a brilliant idea of two front war, and he's the strategist of the century. It's so silly. The writing is on the wall, we don't see it. So now we have armed forces which actually are confused. They don't know whether they have to operate outside and think outside or think inside. So they are at the border, so they are not doing anything. It's a fact. Then we talk about, if you are talking about reverse geopolitics, does army have that sort of a knowledge to actually trace back to the roots from where it is happening? No. Their job starts from the LC after the terrorists enter. So who is thinking beyond? The point I am getting at is, today anyone who says that no, this is not army's job, this is army's job, this is foreign services job, this is a bureaucrat's job, this is his job, and as a result the nation is suffering, they all should be treated as NSAs. They are non-state actors. They are not working for the benefit of the country. So as a country, when we talk, I don't see military, bureaucracy, foreign service, or anyone separate, or even industry, communications, media, legal. They all are one. Only then can we discuss a common problem, and only then, if there is reverse geopolitics, can all these forces be applied. Whether it is legal, who stops you giving 100 legal notices? Internationally, who stops you going to the court? Can't you have a common war going on all fronts simultaneously? Are we doing it? When I say that I should know what is going to happen in next 25 years, geopolitics, Sonali, I do not say that we should have a 25-year plan. Today, the people who are serving should be working to achieve the next 25 years. There has to be an organization, there has to be a set of people who are thinking 50 years ahead. When you say China is talking about 50 and 100 years ahead, I am absolutely with Sonali. That is the type of time they work for. That is the place where our mind has to reach. This mind cannot be, we can't say this mind will belong to IAS, bureaucracy, army. No. We first have to see whether everyone is equipped to even think about it.
True.
So today, personally, I feel, and I have done that entire episode, where I see military is not equipped at all. They have not been trained, they have not been taught to think geopolitics, and we suddenly give out big statements. And these statements, we forget, are being heard across the world. Whether it is Air Force is for ground support or whether it is clash of civilizations. So these are not to be taken lightly.
Okay.
Can we take them lightly? You see the level at which it is being made. So do you ever hear this sort of a statement from China? And now don't say that no, they are not a democracy. Does democracy mean that we talk anything? No, it doesn't. So there's a massive gap. There is a massive gap, firstly in training, firstly in our understanding, because there is no standardization. There is geopolitics is not part of our training. And then there are turf wars, and there are watertight compartments, and resulting in what? Someone picks up a book from somewhere, two terms from somewhere, and suddenly you come and talk. When you have got such a strong academic field to actually give you that sort of support to train minds, to mold minds which are going to be used later, why not do it? And when we are talking about, say, in military, 10, 20, and 30 years, straight away have three slices of 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years service, and have very clear-cut aims. By 10 years, he should achieve what? By 20, what? By 30, what? Automatically, the generation goes up completely aware. Likewise with bureaucracy, likewise with media, likewise with legal, everyone for that matter.
True.
And all these institutions that we have, strategic thinking institutions, and there is no dearth of it. And none of them talk about whatever I am talking of. None of them talk about two front war. And suddenly now everyone talks about two front war. So that's something we have to very, very seriously think.
True.
Coming to political rhetoric, I actually agree with Sonali on one thing, that if there is a party in power, whichever party it may be, they will always exploit whatever the country has achieved, whether it was liberation of Bangladesh. So, did they not exploit it that time?
Yeah.
It was a political rhetoric of the very highest order. Even last 4 5 years, whatever has happened, even that has been exploited. So, I think we have to leave the politicians for that. Their job is that. Their job is popularity, and if they use it, we don't have to crib about it. So, it's been happening earlier. My point is, does that rhetoric actually change the mindset of people into thinking in power, to think that everything is fine and we need not think about
That's-
geopolitics,
that's
and the guard
problem.
goes down?
Yeah, yeah.
That can't happen.
That's the problem. Yeah. True.
So that is how I will like to wind up my part of this entire session, all the 5 episodes also, where we spoke in detail about the politico-military decisions in India since 1947, that is 75 years, and how they have manifested into. It is actually a hindsight discussion. Let it be a hindsight discussion. Will this hindsight affect next 25 and 50 years? If it, then we have really learned.
True.
So we cannot cry on the split milk, but we can definitely learn something out of it.
True.
Yeah, Sonali.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with the broad conclusions that we have reached in these 5 episodes, and I would say we can say Arua by saying by hoping for the best and being optimistic and hoping that academics, the military establishment, and the um, political establishment comes together to for national interest. That's it.
So with this, we come to the end of the 5th episode. After this, there will be a very small episode where we both will conclude, give a gist of the entire thing. And thank you for being with us for all these 5 episodes. And it was lovely interacting with you. There have been a lot of comments also which have been coming to us. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sonali.
Thank you. Thank you.
And see you soon in some other episode, some other topics which me and Sonali will take up again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and bye bye.
Bye.